Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we drill down into the sources you shared and extract the essential insight, the true shortcut to being well-informed. Today we're getting into something that really challenges how most of us think about getting ahead, especially professionals, high achievers. We're doing a deep dive into Paul's radical reordering of preparation. Okay, so let's set the stage. We live in a world where legitimacy is almost entirely about accumulation.
Absolutely.
You get rewarded for what you can stack up, credentials, skills, expertise you can prove, years on a resume. The whole system measures you by what you know and what you can show.
And that's precisely what makes the central claim we're looking at so disruptive.
Right.
We're talking about Paul of Tarsus. I mean, a figure of incredible intellectual caliber.
Right.
And he makes this really shocking declaration that everything that once authenticated him, everything that society said was an achievement, he deliberately reclassifies as loss. Absolute loss. He doesn't just downplay it. He throws it all out.
Which immediately gets to attention that I think every serious leader or learner feels at some point. Yeah. Even if they don't say it out loud.
What's that?
It's this question of, at what point does all our learning stop forming us and start insulating us? When does our knowledge become a wall?
Yeah, and the sources are so clear that this is not some kind of cheap shot at being smart. This is not anti-intellectualism.
Well, not all.
He's not critiquing knowledge. He is forcing a radical reordering of where authority and readiness actually come from. So our mission today is to really unpack the logic here. What do you possibly gain by calling years of hard-won expertise disposable?
To even feel the weight of that reversal, we first have to get just how prepared Paul was. I mean, this isn't some sour grapes from a frustrated amateur.
No, this critique comes from a position of just abundance.
Right.
Professional, intellectual, spiritual abundance. He was the gold standard.
He really was.
The sources paint this picture of a complete insider, someone who had earned comprehensively the right to speak. If you measured legitimacy in that first century Jewish and Greco-Roman world by, say, pedigree, education, and pure zeal, Paul was untouchable. He'd mastered all the metrics.
It's like if you were building the perfect resume for a religious leader back then, his would be printed in gold. So let's walk through the specifics he lays out. It reads like he's building a legal case for his own competence.
Okay, so first, he establishes his foundational identity. He says he was circumcised on the 8th day. Now, that's not just a detail, it's a statement.
It means he's in from the start.
Exactly. Full, immediate covenant inclusion. He's not a late joiner. His fidelity was inherited, established from day one.
And his lineage just confirms it.
Yeah.
Of the people of Israel, the tribe of Benjamin.
Yeah.
Benjamin wasn't just any tribe, right?
Not at all. They were the loyalists, the ones who stood by David's house. So that carries this huge historical and symbolic weight. It signals this deep, long-standing commitment to the true tradition.
And he was culturally pure.
Yeah.
A Hebrew of Hebrews.
Right, which meant he was completely immersed in the culture and the language. He wasn't getting it secondhand.
He lived it.
He lived it. He spoke the language of the scriptures. He knew the customs intimately. He was, the real deal, authentically Jewish in every single sense.
So we've got identity, and then we move to intellect, which was just top tier. As to the law, a Pharisee.
And we have to remember, the Pharisees were the most rigorous, the most intellectually serious religious movement of the time.
The deep thinkers.
The deep thinkers, totally dedicated to the meticulous interpretation and application of the Torah. So that signals serious intellectual horsepower and moral resolve.
And maybe the part that hits home most for us today, his education was elite. He was educated at the feet of Gamaliel.
In Jerusalem, Gamaliel was considered one of the most respected, nuanced rabbis of the entire era. To study under him meant you had textual mastery, rhetorical skill. You were in the top 1% of the intellectual community.
So if we're trying to put that in modern terms, it's like he was a Harvard law grad who also happened to be a dedicated priest, whose family line traced back to the Mayflower, and who was known for living just a blameless public life.
Exactly. Which brings us to his moral accountability. As to righteousness under the law, blameless. His public faithfulness was observable, unimpeachable.
He walked the walk.
He lived what he preached, and that's why he was so zealous in persecuting the early Christian movement. He was willing to be a hardliner for what he believed.
So, to wrap this first part up, we are looking at a man who, by every single measure, bloodline, education, practice, reputation, had earned the right to speak, to lead. He was the finished, prepared product, which, given that immense pedigree, that flawless track record, how does he possibly justify what he does next? It's not a subtle shift. It's a complete, almost violent overturn.
That's the shocking reclassification at the heart of it all. Whatever were gains to me, I now consider loss for the sake of Christ. And this isn't an understatement. It's like theological accounting.
Right.
He didn't just move these assets to a lower priority. He counted them as loss, as a deficit on his spiritual balance sheet.
But wait, isn't that a little harsh? I mean, we're talking about years of discipline, fidelity, scholarly rigor. The very things he was taught were virtues. Is he just being dramatic?
No, it is absolutely fundamental, and the language he uses proves it. He uses this abrasive Greek word skubalon.
Skubalon.
Yeah. And the sources on this define it as refuse, waste, or something you throw out to prevent contamination. It's a deliberately repulsive word. Why would he use a word like that for something so valuable?
Because the danger he's exposing here is hidden. It's profound. He realized these credentials, these gains, they weren't functioning as gifts to serve God anymore.
They were functioning as a rival to God.
Exactly. For so many of us who are serious learners, the sources point to this quiet danger. Learning subtly replaces intimacy.
We spend so much time analyzing the framework that we forget the fire. Theology becomes a substitute for an actual encounter. We mistake intellectual competence for spiritual transformation.
So the credentials themselves, the very tools he was supposed to use, they became this subtle wall, insulating him from the vulnerability and the dependence that a real relationship requires.
He'd built a fortress of competence. He could approach God armed with all his reasons and achievements instead of just coming empty-handed in faith.
And what happens next isn't a polite request to update his resume. It's a violent dismantling of that fortress. We see it in that catastrophic unmaking on the Damascus Road.
Right. Christ doesn't refine Paul's preparation. He suspends it.
Just think about the humiliation of that moment. The man who dedicated his life to knowing the scriptures inside and out. He can't recognize the Messiah standing right in front of him.
He's struck blind.
Blind, the confident leader who always knew where he was going now has to be led by the hand.
And he's forced into silence. He waits in complete darkness and helplessness for 3 days. All his productivity, all his achievement, all that zeal gone, suspended. He gets no immediate assignment.
Wow, that's not a promotion. That is a forced factory reset. Why the blindness, though? What's the point of that?
It's what you might call pedagogical mercy. It's a deliberate interruption that forces dependence. His new authority doesn't come from the continuity of his old life. It comes from the rupture.
And a surrender.
From the surrender to grace. Encounter precedes assignment. Before Paul is sent to speak for Christ, he first has to be undone by Christ. So in this new vision, preparation doesn't begin with accumulation. It begins with absolute dependence.
That brings up a massive practical question for any leader or learner listening right now. If your legitimacy isn't rooted in your credentials, in that resume you've built, what validates your authority?
Yes.
If Paul threw out his amazing list of achievements, what did he point to as proof that he was worth following?
Well, he adopts this radically relational metric. His validation didn't come from letters of recommendation, which were like the institutional endorsements of the day. It came from transformed communities.
And this is where he brings in that incredible metaphor from 2 Corinthians. You yourselves are our letter, written on our hearts, to be known and read by all. That's such a profound reversal.
It is. He's locating his authority not in some external ink on parchment, but in embodied witness. His proof of work is the life change that people can see in others. He even says in that same chapter that sufficiency is from God, and he warns that any confidence you get from yourself risks becoming a rival to grace.
And he makes that core distinction, which is just central to all this. The letter kills, but the Spirit gives life.
We should probably pause on that. What does that actually mean for us today?
Well, the letter represents this rigid adherence to rules, systems, or just unapplied knowledge, knowledge that's detached from living communion.
So it's knowledge that can diagnose but can't heal.
Exactly. It can regulate behavior, but it can't transform desire. And knowledge that's detached from the living reality it describes doesn't just fail to bring life, it actively obscures it. It creates this false sense of arrival. Credentials become a barrier where you actually need intimacy.
And his primary case study for this messy relational validation, the Corinthian church. And let's remember, Corinth was a complete disaster zone. Oh, absolutely. Fractured, theologically confused, morally struggling, constantly questioning Paul's authority.
Yet he points to them with all their imperfections, and he calls them his seal of apostleship.
That is the definition of messy grace.
It's radical proof that ministry fruit is relational, it's incarnational, it's often deeply imperfect, it's not performative. His authority wasn't shown by a perfectly polished group, but by a community that was struggling, yes, but was alive. And demonstrably being changed by the Spirit, that is a fragile, vulnerable way to define success.
It is, and it brings us to the necessary reordering of formation, which is maybe the most practical part of our deep dive. We have to draw a clear line between two things: being equipped, which is about tools and skills and knowledge, and being transformed.
And transformation is about.
It's about identity, desire, and dependence.
So, the goal isn't better tools. It's a new foundation for the self. The deepest preparation, Paul realized, isn't accumulated knowledge about Christ. It's an ever-deepening, vulnerable participation in Christ.
That's his great ambition, that I may know him and the power of his resurrection. It's not about maximizing your effectiveness. It's about maximizing union.
And this requires a deep recalibration for, professionals and learners today. The sources are so clear. This is not an argument to stop learning or to throw away your skills.
No, it's about reassigning their purpose. The central problem is that subtle shift, where learning replaces intimacy and competence replaces dependence.
Can you give us an example of how that might show up in a modern leader's life? How does confidence replacing transformation actually manifest in a destructive way, even if the person is successful?
Well, it often creates a high degree of defensive leadership. When a leader's confidence is rooted mostly in their intellectual competence, their degrees, their awards, their ability to execute, any challenge to their knowledge feels like an existential threat.
They become brittle.
Very brittle. They can't admit mistakes. They often become rigid, demanding systems and rules to maintain control because their authority is external. It's self-constructed, not rooted in the durability of who they are inside.
That makes perfect sense. The pursuit of excellence is fine. But when that excellence becomes the primary source of my personal worthiness, I can't afford to be wrong. I can't afford to be dependent.
Exactly. So the reordering means knowledge is no longer the foundation of authority. It becomes a servant of intimacy. We're challenged to approach our source material, whether it's scripture or even complex business data first, as a place of encounter.
The fire.
The fire, yes, before it becomes just an object of detached analysis, the framework.
And Paul knew this couldn't happen in a vacuum. Wisdom is transmitted relationally. His entire network was built on mentored discipleship. Timothy, Titus, Ananias. Why is that relational architecture so key to tempering brilliance?
Because isolated brilliance is dangerous. It's what allows competence to become confidence. When you're accountable to other people, when your knowledge is constantly being applied in the messy, real world of discipleship, you just can't afford to be detached. That relational structure ensures competence is always being tested by compassion.
And intellectual pride is tempered by dependence on others and on God.
Which brings us back to that quiet rivalry we mentioned. That unspoken fear that our competence is masking.
Yeah.
The fear is, if my titles were stripped away, if my measurable success just vanished, if my competence were suddenly suspended, what would be left? Paul's answer is that what remains must be a durable identity rooted in dependence.
Paul's radical logic, it forces us to accept that preparation must end not in expertise, but in communion. The goal is this durable authority that's rooted in being known by Christ, not just knowing a lot of religious content about him.
And Paul leaves us with this relentless, practical litmus test, which you can pull directly from the source material and apply to your own life this week.
What is it?
Ask yourself, if everything that makes you impressive, your degrees, your titles, your measurable success were instantly taken away, would your faith endure? And would your life still bear witness? That ultimately is the measure of true readiness and of faithfulness.
That is the ultimate challenge this deep dive leaves us with. Where is your sense of legitimacy anchored right now? And this isn't a condemnation of excellence, go be the best in your field, but it is a profound invitation to restore knowledge to its rightful role. Not as a substitute for intimacy, but as its essential servant. Because the incredible gain he was seeking by counting all those credentials as loss was simply the surpassing worth of knowing Christ. Go explore that necessary tension this week.